Today we're looking at number 8 in the series on the book of Acts on the Jerusalem Council. I happen to be today in the former city of Pompeii, the one that was buried under all that ash in the explosive eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79. So not that far apart in time, and I've been looking around at the buildings and at the architecture and the pictures on the walls, the frescoes and so on. And this would be familiar territory to many people there in Jerusalem. They would have seen similar things among the Roman houses, the Greek-speaking peoples too. So there is a connection there. But when we think about the Jerusalem Council, the reason for it was because of all these foreigners, the Romans, the Greeks, the other peoples of the empire that were coming in and joining the church and had not been part of that Jewish tradition. And there were some who were saying, no, you basically got to become a Jew first and then you can become a Christian. You have to be circumcised, you have to observe all the Jewish regulations before you can then follow Jesus. And there were these Judaizers, as they were called, who went around preaching this message, and they had caused a lot of trouble, particularly there in Antioch. And so Paul and others had come to Jerusalem to try and settle this issue, and met together with the apostles, those who had followed Jesus, to say, well, what are we going to do about all these people who don't know anything about the Jewish traditions? How are we going to approach that? And it's a very interesting study there in Acts chapter 15. I invite you to go back and look very carefully at what happened. We have our big meetings where we decide different things about church policy and governance too. But it's a bit different there in Acts 15. They met together and they discussed the issue, and they were happy that all these people were joining the church and that God's message of salvation was being accepted by all these foreigners too. It was spreading like wildfire throughout the empire. So they decided, under the leadership of James, 4 things: to avoid food sacrificed to idols, to abstain from eating blood, to abstain from anything that had been strangled. Those are all Jewish regulations. And finally, to avoid sexual immorality, the one that probably is most relevant still to us today. I'm a vegetarian, those other things don't really apply. So as they decided that, when it was presented, it wasn't done by vote, it wasn't everybody in favor, this, that and the other, and there were no sanctions if you didn't. They simply said, this is what we recommend. And James gets up and says, it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to advise you to do these things. So this Jerusalem Council gives us a very good insight into, I think, the way we should be doing things. They operated by consensus. It was not an imposition, and there was no kind of censure if you didn't do it. And in fact, later on, Paul is saying, well, food sacrificed to idols, who cares? Idols don't exist, it doesn't really matter. But he did say, don't make your weaker brother stumble. So as you think of these things this week, see how things apply to us in the way that we operate. We need to be working in the same kind of way, not trying to impose our ideas by coercion, but simply to say to people, this is the way we understand it, this is the way we believe it to be true, and we invite you to come together on these principles. So as you study this week, may you think very deeply about how you see the church and your role in it and its leadership, and may God bless you as you think about these things.